But
Yes, sir.
so I'm interested in, because you're also doing Asia, so I was wondering, Iran is one of those places. There's so many issues happening, but I think getting into one of these places and getting the ethics and universal declaration, these things are what I'm trying to do. We have courses and so forth, and we try
Yes.
to bring that in. So I will. Anyhow, we are working together with Jim was with us a couple of times, and so now you're the second time you're on a on our program, which is we've been doing it for 26 weeks now, almost having a variety of different areas that we've looked covered in terms of this pandemic.
No, this is
Yeah.
an excellent series. I look forward to attending more.
Yes.
Alright.
And so we're waiting for Jim. That's the last, and then we'll.
Yeah.
I will call him back again. I know he's
Yeah,
trying
that's
hard. I'll put myself on mute.
Yeah, he's here. He's here. He's here. I've just admitted him. He should be on.
All right, then we shall start.
Oh, very good.
Yeah.
I'll just remind Jim what we're doing.
Still have a minute.
Yeah, Ilana, you met Ray. That's Ilana Dalmaker from Israel, and Ilana, that's Mahendra Patel, who you'll be
Hello.
doing
Hi,
from
nice to meet you.
UK.
Hi.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah,
Hi.
and that's Des Cahill, is from the Melbourne unit. He's a professor from RMIT University, but he does a summary of what happened
Hey.
each of these webinars.
General Jim, good morning. Welcome. Good to have you.
He's muted. He's
I'll
muted.
just unmute you. Yeah.
He's muted.
Yes.
Okay. Good day, Jim. I hope you had your registration was okay. Do you have some problems?
Who, me?
Yeah.
No. No, Ray, Dr. Swinton called me and straightened me out.
That's
that.
beyond my ability, General.
Well, in our group here, we have two Army people. Jim, Brigadier Jim, and he's a Colonel Derek. Derek is a colonel, and you're.
Two Army.
Sorry?
Two Army people.
Yeah, that's what I said.
Yeah.
So we have the both of you here.
Probably Ilana's also would have had Army experience.
Pardon?
You would have had Army experience, right, Ilana?
An Army experience? No, I've not.
No? Oh,
No, my sons have, and my husband, but not me.
not you. Okay.
No.
All right, so Jim.
Okay, I think we can.
Yeah, we can start.
If you want to brief.
And after we finish, I'll call you. So you will be speaking on behalf of the society, and Ray will then do his presentation. And after that, can you check if KK is coming?
He's there, but his mic is off.
No, Saurabh told me that he was at another meeting and coming from there. They all connected.
He's just joining in a couple
Yeah,
of
I think. Okay, no issues. No issues. Thank you.
Ilana, you'll be into. I will just briefly, but you will introduce KK for his presentation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'll admit everyone in the meantime because that takes a couple of minutes.
Do that, yes.
And
Please check the WhatsApp, Derek, because if anyone has any registration issues, please send the link.
yes, I'll do that.
He just joined in.
Good evening, sir. Dr. KK Agarwal, good evening.
Yes, I'm there. Thank you very much.
Welcome. Good to have you, sir.
And he's come from another meeting. All right. A very good early morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night for those of us from Melbourne. I'm Professor Russell D'Souza from Melbourne, talking to you from Melbourne. I'm the chair of the Education Department of the UNESCO Chair in Bioethics, and I want to welcome you to the 26th webinar of the series, the international panel discussion series that we have. And for those of you who don't know, the UNESCO Chair has been running. We have been on behalf of the UNESCO Chair having these webinars for 26 weeks now, starting in April when we had the pandemic, and we've been going through many different avenues, different areas. The UNESCO Chair has little over 250 centers across 58 countries in all the continents, and so one of the issues is the main reason, and we look at education in terms of the ethics and so forth, particularly with reference to the Universal Declaration on Bioethics and Human Rights. And these webinars have been an important part of displaying and demonstrating solidarity in the fact that it's Article 13 of the Universal Declaration, solidarity and cooperation. So we have been doing this, and you will see that we usually have our colleagues from around the world who join us in this program, where we reinforce that all of us in the world are going through this together. Today, I want to also my co-chair is Professor Mary Matthew from the Education Department and the head of the Indian program. We also have Dr. Colonel Professor Derek D'Souza, who is going to be the moderator of the chat box, and your questions will be put there. He will explain that to you. And I'm delighted that last week, the 25, was to look at disaster planning and disaster preparation, and that was in association with the Society for Disaster Medicine and Public Health from the United States. Now, I'm very delighted to introduce here that today we are looking at the COVID vaccine, the update on science, and the ethical issues. So we're doing this in collaboration or in association with the Society for Disaster Medicine and Public Health from the United States, which of course has their links around the world. And for that, I have with us here Brigadier Professor James, who is the Executive Director of the Society for Disaster Medicine and Public Health, and the editor-in-chief of their journal. And also I have with me representing the Society, Professor Raymond Swinton, who is the Chief of the Division of Emergency Disaster Global Health at the University of Texas in the southwestern Dallas, Texas, from the United States. They are both going to represent the society and will be speaking to you. I have today's program. We have the very distinguished Professor Dr. K.K. Agarwal, who will be introduced to you more formally by Professor Dr. Ilana Belmaker. But before I go there, I'll just say that Dr. K.K. Agarwal is the president of the Confederation of the Medical Associations of Asia and Oceania. For those of you who might not know, Oceania includes Australia, New Zealand, and so forth, and probably Fiji and all the Pacific region, Asia Pacific region. So he will be presenting and talking to us on an update on understanding the COVID vaccine and all the issues around it. Then I have with us Professor Ilana Bellmaker, who is the professor of public health, has been for a long time. Now, very importantly, Professor Ilana Bellmaker has she's a public health expert, but she has a long experience with delivering of routine childhood vaccine coverage to the populations of the southern region of Israel, which includes the large population of the Bedouin, which are the semi-nomadic Arabs living in temporary encampments with no fixed address. And of course, she has been particularly involved in increasing the vaccine coverage for the first measles vaccine at age 2, and of course, very importantly, to the difficult to reach population. And she has been doing this work from 1990 to 2003, and this ended up in improving and maintaining throughout the years the health of this population. So, and she's also published in this area, as she teaches also in ethical dilemmas in public health to students of public health on lecturing on protecting future generations. This is part of the UNESCO program. She's in the Education Department of Education. She does that. So she will be chairing this part of it, and then we have Professor Mahendra Patel. You want to wave out? That's Dr. Mahendra Patel. You want to put your hand up, Mahendra, so people can see you? Yeah. Mahendra Patel is professor of pharmacy at a couple of universities, but also from the Royal Pharmaceutical Society, and he's also teaches with the Education Department of the UNESCO, and he's going to be taking part in the discussions, taking on the other aspect of the vaccine, from the supply chain and the scaling up to it reaching the patient. All right, so that's where we are, and that's what we have today. So now, having told you this and given you this, I'm going to now ask Professor Dr. Mary Matthew, the co-chair of this program, to address you. Yes, over to you, Professor Mary Matthew.
Thank you, Dr. Russell, and welcome to this 26th webinar, which has been organized by the Department of Education of the UNESCO Chair in Bioethics, Haifa. We are very excited.
Is there something? Derek, do you want to? I think we're having some problem with her.
Yeah, I think Professor Mary is having a little bit of issue maybe with her data. So on her behalf, a very, very warm welcome. All across the globe, we have this very, very distinguished panel before us. And of course, Professor Dr. K.K. Agarwal needs no introduction. He's been a regular guest, a regular attendee, and today he'll be bringing us up to speed, as it were, on the progress of vaccines. We have Professor Mahendra Patel as well. And I'll be looking after the chat box. So we request all the participants who are here to kindly put in your questions or comments. And the distinguished panelists can address them as well in case you are not really speaking at the time. You can watch the chat box and you can also answer the questions. You may also post any reading material or additional material that you feel would be helpful, because there are a lot of students who are here watching this discussion and even other faculty. So maybe in case there is something that is useful, you can post it there as well, and everyone can share. Welcome, Dr. Mary, back to you.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. I was trying to connect on the phone. In the meantime, so welcome, and I'm sorry for the interruption. And this is our 26th webinar, and we're happy to today that we're going to talk about the vaccine. Just a few points regarding the vaccine. If many of you have looked into this morning's Deccan Herald, I don't know if you all read these papers, and I'll read out the headline for you, and it says, "Don't pin hopes on a COVID vaccine. It may be a 2-year wait." So probably Dr. K.K. Agarwal can address a country of 1.3 billion people. And as far as I know, that 8 vaccines have come into the clinical phase. And by the end of this year and the beginning of next year, we will get the results. But our problem is probably we still have to wait for the market to for the vaccine to come out in the market. But more than that, the ethical challenge is who's going to get the vaccine first. With such a large population, they're talking about $290 billion as the cost of providing this vaccine to the people of India. So it's really exciting that we have Dr. K.K. Agarwal to discuss this. And of course, thank you for Dr. James and Dr. Ray for coming in from the public health side and Society of Disaster Medicine. And I'm sure we'll at least get some idea about what is happening in the vaccine world with regards to COVID-19. So with that, I'll hand over to Dr. Derek. You have finished your
I'll just,
what you have to say to the audience.
Add a line. Thank you, Dr. Mary. I'll just add a line that we also have this webinar being simultaneously live streamed on YouTube. I've posted the link and I'm doing it again right now. So you feel free to share this link with your other colleagues who maybe would like to log in. Some of them find it easier. You don't have to come via Zoom or register and things like that. You can just click on the link and watch this live on YouTube, and you can even post your comments there as well. I'll be monitoring that and we can all be together. So with that, back to Dr. Mary to take this forward. Thank you.
Let me say thank you, Mary, and thank you, Derek, for this, and all of you. But while this is certainly very important, I think I saw Dr. Soumya Swaminathan from the WHO has just given a video message talking about what the WHO expects. Here in Australia, we are supporting the COVAX. Australia has put 150 million for that's the WHO program. But I want to also bring here the number of ethical issues that we are going to look at, starting from the cell line. We already have issues, ethical issues with, for example, the Oxford, which is using one of the fetal cell lines. So that is already an issue that has come up. So starting from there down, we have several areas, right? From then comes to the trials, then comes the human challenge trials, whatever. So the whole area, and then when we move further into the distributive justice, how do we allocate? So we see a lot of ethical issues, and I'm sure Dr. K.K. Agarwal will highlight some of these areas, and we'll discuss that too. It being an important part of what we are focusing here. So without too much of ado now, I'm going. So we've given you an idea of what the UNESCO chair has been doing, continues to do, and we will be continuing with this program. But now we've also have the Society for Disaster Medicine and Public Health with us. So I'm now going to ask the Executive Director and the head, Dr. Brigadier Professor James, to address you. Can you, Jim, can you?
Yes.
There, I got it. Anyway, good morning, everyone. It really is both a pleasure and honor to be here representing our Society of Disaster Medicine and Public Health, and as importantly, our peer-reviewed journal, Disaster Medicine and Public Health Preparedness. I'm here today more to listen than to speak. I did want to make a few opening remarks about this particular webinar. I've really been looking forward to the discussions on vaccines. I am so happy Mary introduced that headline because I think it's time for a big dose of realism in terms of what's happening in the vaccine space. We have over, I think at last count, 150 different vaccines under development using at least 3 or 4 different approaches. And to date, I think, at least the last article I read, approximately 18 had reached the clinical phase, the third phase in the trials. Of these 18 efforts, I think it was 11 specifically excluded elderly. 7 of the remaining 7 didn't directly exclude the elderly, but many of them excluded them indirectly by not considering people with coexisting conditions, etc. So here we are 8 months into this. We have the best well-defined risk group, the elderly. I don't think there's too many issues that need to be addressed that with limited vaccine supply, one would go for the high risk group, meaning the elderly, yet we will not have the effectiveness data specific to that target group. So I think that's one of the problems. The second problem is the supply problem. With all of the effort that's going on in the United States, I think the best guess is if we find an effective vaccine, we'll have approximately 20 million doses to distribute come the beginning, roughly the beginning of next year. That can hardly put a dent in the requirement, let alone the global requirement. The data I have looked at, we have approximately 20 million healthcare personnel, whether they're doctors, nurses, attendants, people working in the hospital, etc. I think there's a strong indication that that will be our first target group for immunization, since we obviously need those people to provide the care for those who come down with COVID. Then there is the logistical problem, even if we have sufficient doses, is to be able to distribute them globally. And I'm not saying the United States is the only place that's going to have an effective vaccine, but still, from wherever they're developed, to get them transported safely to the injection site is going to be almost an overwhelming problem. So I really think we need to look at addressing COVID-19 in ways that we can't count on a vaccine being here in a reasonable amount of time to get back to some kind of normal. Remember, in closing, it's 40 years ago, we had this same effort put into developing an AIDS vaccine, and we have yet to field an effective one. So I think we need a dose of reality. And with that, I'm very much looking forward to listening to everybody. And I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Swinton, who will do a little more explanation of who and what we are. Thank you.
Yeah, over to you, Ray. Professor Raymond Simpson.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Can you see the slides well?
Yes, yes, we
We
do.
good? Excellent, thank you. It is such a pleasure and an honor to be here with you with such distinguished colleagues and attendees from across the world. The opportunity here to speak and to be associated with the Department of Education from UNESCO's Chair in Bioethics, Professors Russell D'Souza, Professor Derek D'Souza, and Professor Mary Matthew. It is truly an honor. And on behalf of the Society of Disaster Medicine and Public Health and the Journal of Disaster Medicine and Public Health Preparedness, and our founding and editor-in-chief, Dr. James, who you've just met, it is truly a pleasure to be here. And most importantly, to our distinguished speakers who are here, the reason we are gathered today to listen and learn on the science update and the ethics that have been nicely outlined for us already. I come to you today, though, also, like many of you attending this session, as a frontline provider. As a physician, I'm an academician in emergency medicine, clinically practicing at a large academic institution and public hospital. I have seen, as you have, the ravages of COVID-19 on our patients as well as on our communities. The pursuit of a vaccine and the access and utility of its deployment is something on the forefront of all of our minds. Yet we know there are challenges that lie ahead with the vaccine implementation. When we look at the vaccine concept, just this weekend, I just posed these few articles that I quickly found just this weekend, beginning with a major release by the National Academies of Science from the United States, looking at, if you will, the framework for the equitable allocation of such a vaccine. This is not a small document. It's 260 plus pages that I do look forward to getting more familiar with. Taking on that challenge and headline we see in such publications as the Los Angeles Times, just yesterday, I believe, looking at the headline, who will get the priority for the vaccine? We see coming out of the UK Reuters publication just yesterday, several hours ago now, the idea that they expect a rollout of the vaccine in just 3 months in the UK. And even in the United States, in other ways related, we see Richard Besser, one of our former heads, interim heads of the CDC, who's also currently the CEO of the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, put out a quick opinion piece just in the last 24 hours, looking at the impact of the diagnosis on the significant leadership in our country, along with President Trump and others, and the role that the vaccine may, as well as may not play in what needs to lie ahead in what we do. In looking at these things, I want to take a moment before we begin on the vaccines and share a little bit of what I hope is hope and encouragement, and the importance of advancing the sciences, such as the important topic we're addressing today. And then I want to remind us what's near and dear to my heart, which is the education and training piece, because truly I think that is the cornerstone ultimately that will get us to the next level of resiliency in this event. The COVID pandemic has obviously attacked every aspect of our existence and well-being. The challenges have been great. And yet we see in this picture, simple diagrams perhaps, but when we work together, we build resilience, we build capacity. You see, when we work together and as those pieces begin to come together, each of our respective countries has a role to play. And the picture that begins to take shape is larger and it fits nicely together when we hold up each other's portion. Also, something special happens as we begin to put our pieces together, if you will. We see we create openings for others to join us and the picture actually gets bigger and clearer. With such a role of inclusivity, we know we can overcome these challenges. And perhaps we can see the word COVID as that acronym, not just to be representing the pandemic, but perhaps it can represent this, countries victorious over disease. If we were to look at how we accomplish this, we know there are many demands on us. We have had to learn as providers that we must first survive if we are going to help others. We must take care of ourselves and keep our teams functional, our facilities up and running if we're going to be able to handle the volumes of needs that we have faced. We know that we are here to help people heal the ravages of this disease that we have seen. We also know that we must learn, seeking new knowledge as we're doing today, adapting our old skills as well as learning new skills. We must always remember the faces of who have died and who are currently suffering greatly over this event, as well as their family and friends who have lost much, many giving everything in the fight over this COVID pandemic. We have an obligation to advancing the sciences as providers, as scientists, as academicians, as clinicians all around the world. We have seen things in the last 6 months that are remarkable in progress. Our concept today on talking about vaccines is such an example. Lastly, and important to me as well, and I hope to you, is that we must also teach. We must learn from what did work and perhaps even greater from what didn't work, that we can help others and future providers for the undoubted challenges that they will be facing as well. In doing so, the Advancing the Science piece is what we're about today. We are so appreciative of the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization that represents this special seminar and webinar series. I'm as grateful also to the Society and to the journal that we have mentioned. For it's the Journal of Public Health and Disaster Medicine has taken a special initiative to us that are clinicians on the front line, becoming the go-to place, if you will, for easy reference and rapid release of information that's been relevant to our clinical practices here. We are so happy and grateful to UNESCO, to the Society, to journals such as this, and many others around the globe that are doing wonderful initiatives. With the Society, I've been asked to present a very brief summary of some of the education and training programs that we have ongoing, because I do truly believe that the pathway to building resiliency long-term and sustainable is through education and training. One such initiative of many around the world is our Emergency Disaster Global Health Sciences Alliance. This, if you will, as a program director and postdoctorate fellowships at my own institution for a number of years, we learned very quickly the value and how others can come together and build a collaborative effort so that we can begin to learn and work and function together perhaps better. And more importantly, to set a foundation for others and experts to follow us that will be able to take that torch and begin in collaborative ways that we could only dream possible. But in order to do so, it begins with learning and having some common curriculum, having a common approach to learning at the expert level. That's what this program is about. And it's an interesting place to begin. This is very much a work in progress. If being a part of helping in postgraduate education, looking at expert level training and fellowship and postdoctorate work is interesting to you, please send us an email. My emails are listed both here. We actually have a pilot program utilizing this common curriculum that will begin underway in Kuala Lumpur in just a matter of weeks. But this is very much a work in progress and would benefit from many of you joining us, and we welcome your input. For now, I turn this over to Professor Mary Matthew as we begin to hear from our presenters, begin to learn and experience from their experience and expertise. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share these moments with you. And I'm excited as well to look and to learn and to be together today as we look at these challenges. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ray, for that introduction here. And away, both Mary and Derek and myself are thank you to your society for collaborating with us, and we look forward to continuing this for the betterment of everyone in the world. So now I'm going to ask Dr. Professor Ilana Belmeka. I've already introduced Professor Ilana Belmeka as a professor from the Ben-Gurion University of the Negev in Israel. And she's going to introduce our speaker for today, Dr. K.K. Agarwal, the president of the Confederation of the Medical Associations of Asia and Oceania. Over to you, Ilana.
Thank you, Russell. It is truly an honor for me to be able to introduce our very, very distinguished speaker, Dr. K.K. Agarwal. As Russell mentioned, he's the president of the Confederation of Medical Associations in Asia and Oceania. He's also the president of the Heart Care Foundation of India and past president of the Indian Medical Association. He's a physician and a cardiologist who has published very, very widely. He's had published many, many books and thousands of articles in national and international press. And as a result of his distinguished career, he's received several very, very top awards. He's received the Padma Shri Award from the Indian government, which is one of the highest civilian awards in India for his contribution to the field of medicine. He also has received the Dr. B.C. Roy Award, which is also this is the highest Indian award in the medical category. And he's also received numerous other awards that are really too numerous for me to mention. And I'll say that really what struck me most in reading about him and looking him up on the internet was he's posted literally hundreds of talks on YouTube and participated in countless webinars since this COVID virus epidemic started, in order to educate people about multiple aspects of the COVID disease. And I think it's remarkable the number of hours he's put in on a volunteer basis to help people all over the world to cope with this. And we will now like you, Dr. KK Agarwal, to give us an update on the state of vaccine development at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ilana. Thank you, Derek. Thank you, Dr. Patel, Dr. D'Souza, Mary, James, many others who are present here. Thank you for giving me this an opportunity for an important subject. For me, this is 792nd non-stop session in the last 6 months, which I'm doing, taking no off even on Sunday, the 2nd of October. With the basic aim of creating awareness about a new disease called COVID-19. As this session will also go to all my member countries, this session I will also post it to all my doctors in my country. As in the last 1 week, when I talk to most of the doctors, they say they are not aware about basics of vaccine. So I will start from very basics of vaccine, then we come back to the current situation and touching the ethics. So for many of you who are vaccine experts, it may be a revision for you. But most of the doctors in the whole Asia are not aware about the basics of vaccine. They only know vaccine is available. They don't know what type of a vaccine is available. Let me share the screen. Kindly give me the permission.
Yeah, I made you co-yes.
Yes. So this is, I'm basically updating about vaccine. Now, why do we need a vaccine? If you want to end this epidemic or a pandemic, you may require a vaccine. It could be important to control future epidemics if you get COVID-20.
And sir, if you could just make it full screen, please. If you could just make the slide. Yeah, thank you.
And Perfect. It will be an important contribution to the society, because the way this vaccine has taught us every minute about what a vaccine is. We need the technical feasibility, natural immunity, limited strain diversity, and spike protein likely to be the key antibody target. But we have a concern like which happened in dengue, possibility of antibody-dependent enhancement, which I will discuss, and the timeliness faster than before, but still not fast enough. These are just on record. Starting from January 10, people started working on the vaccine. Now, this is the most important slide. And that is, for me, this is the most important slide. If I have to explain COVID-19, it's acute, means less than 3 months. It's manageable, I'm not writing curable. Immunogenic, the trigger is immunogenic. Thrombogenic, which is the after effect. Inflammatory, viral, notifiable disease. Out of which, if I have to make a vaccine, it has to treat its acute phase. It has to prevent the acute phase, which has 2 components, the viral replicating phase and the non-viral replicating phase. So it has to prevent both the first viral replicating phase, which is 9 days, and a non-viral replicating phase, which is 9 to 90 days. It must prevent its immunogenicity. It must prevent its thrombogenesis. It must prevent its inflammation, and it must prevent it as a disease. Therefore, you may end up into a virus which is preventing inflammation, a vaccine which is preventing inflammation but not thrombogenicity or not immunogenicity. We will be in a problem. Therefore, these are the components which needs to be prevented. How do I go? Yes. So we must understand certain basics of a virus. Normally, a virus has a DNA. It transcribes into messenger RNA, which makes a protein. But in this particular condition, we don't have that DNA part because this is the RNA virus. The virus produces mRNA, which makes a protein. Therefore, remember two things: virus, messenger RNA, and protein. This is the virus. This virus has a RNA. It has a envelope. It has a spike protein. It has a membrane. How do we remember? Imagine this person is RNA. He is wearing a banyan, white colored. This is the membrane. He is wearing a shirt, which is the envelope, and he's containing the spike proteins, which are the buttons. And then he has a non-structural proteins, which are the thread. So you can imagine a virus. A virus is nothing but a RNA, the human being, along with membrane, which is the white trouser, which is the white banyan, and it is a shirt, which is the envelope with these buttons, which are the spikes. That's the structure of a virus. Now, when I go in detailed of the viral structure, when I go to the detailed of the viral structure, sorry, I have to go back. So here, I can use the whole, I'll come back to that, sorry. So when I go to the structure of the virus, this is the structure. The top line is the structure of the virus. When I want to use a vaccine, so I can use the whole virus, or I can use the components of the virus. So I have options ORF1A, ORF1B. Here we are targeting remdesivir and the favipiravir. Then I have a spike protein. Then I have an E gene, M gene, N gene, and other structural proteins. And this spike protein has RBM and FP. Remember these 2 points: receptor binding domain and fusion protein. And the whole spike protein I can use as an antigen. Now this vaccine, this virus releases RNA. So I can use this as an antigen. I can use spike as an antigen. Okay, I can use the RBM as an antigen, receptor binding protein. I can use the fusion protein as an antigen. I can use the whole spike protein as an antigen. I can use the terminal points of the spike protein as an antigen. I can use N antigen, M antigen, E gene, M gene, N gene, spike protein, or I can use ORF1AB, ORF1B. That means I can remove any part of the virus and try to use, can I make a vaccine out of it? Now this inside my body is dependent on RNA, dependent RNA polymerase. Here again, the drugs are acting, then it transmits into my body. This is how it is working. And here comes the role of non-structural proteins. Now see, this virus also has a lot of non-structural proteins. These are the threads of my shirt, which are causing lots of action. Non-structural protein 1116 is proofreading. NSP. So the question is, can I use non-structural proteins as an antigen and produce antibodies? And here comes the role of that the only thing which has been shown is spike. Why are we taking spike? Because this has the RBM, receptor binding domain. So because of the presence of receptor binding domain, most of the studies are using spike as an antigen, but not membrane, envelope, nucleocapsid. So therefore, at the moment, only 2 vaccines are developing, one using the protein, which is spike, or its components, or they are using the genes, which are DNA and RNA vaccines, or they are using the portion of a spike protein. In the spike, what they are working on is, in the spike, they are using the spike as a whole, different parts of the spike. the terminal portion of the spike, which is called tip of the spike, and RBM. They are not using the fusion protein as the antigenic. So they are finding that we can use a vaccine against RBM using RBM as a protein, the whole spike as a protein, subcomponents, that means divisions of the protein or the tip of the protein. Now here, this is just for a record. Then we have preclinical testing, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, everybody knows. But here comes three important things: early or limited approval, approval, and combined phase 1 and phase 2 trials. This will be used a lot when I discuss further. So there are currently in phase 1, 28 vaccine, phase 2, 14 vaccine, phase 3, 11 vaccines, limited 5, approved 0. This is from one of the vaccine tracker, but total vaccine may be 150, but these are the most important ones which I will be talking about. Limited means the 5 of them are already under use. They have been launched. So that 5 also we will be talking about. Therefore, a virus I can use live virus, the whole virus, I can use it as a vaccine. I can inactivate a virus, kill the virus, and use it as it is. I can take a viral, attenuate it over a culture, which can be a fetal culture, cell culture, tissue culture, which can be on a animal culture. I can do it in different cells. Then I can use the gene part of the virus, which is RNA, DNA, and plasmids. I can also create an artificial gene called recombinant technique. Then I can use the spike part of the virus as a whole, subpart or RBD, or I can use other parts of the virus, which is envelope, membrane, or a virus-like particle. So I go back to show you what a VLP is. Now, if if I use this along with a shirt inside, this is VLP. VLP is a virus-like particle. That means membrane, envelope, and buttons without the RNA. That becomes a VLP-like particle that people use to make a vaccine. So I can also make a vaccine out of the toxin, but not in this case. I can use an adjuvant to boost the action of the protein. I can use other viruses. Now, what is other viruses? I use another virus, take away its buttons, and the button area is genes which replicate that virus, and put some other viruses proteins into it. These will be called as vector viruses. I can make monoclonal antibodies used in Donald Trump yesterday, and I can give a passive immunity by plasma therapy. I can create a vaccine which is oral, which is injection, which is intradermal or intramuscular, nasal, skin. I can introduce it by skin. I can make 1-dose vaccine, 2-dose vaccine, a vaccine requiring a booster, or a vaccine requiring an annual dose. I can create a vaccine for age less than 18, 18 to 25, 55 plus, 5 to 12. Now mind it, whatever I've spoken, every strategy is being used for a new vaccine. Whatever I have spoken, every vaccine, somebody is working on less than 18, somebody more 18 to 25, 55, somebody 55 plus, somebody is working on oral, somebody is on intradermal, somebody on intramuscular, somebody on nasal, somebody on skin, somebody on live virus, somebody inactivated virus. Every possible people are working on every possible thing. Let me come back and summarize one of them. Vaccine as a healthy challenge. Of course, as on today, till the vaccines are available, masking is the healthy challenge. It reduces, convert a vaccine, it reduces virus into my body to a limited quantity, and I end up in getting a mild infection. Variolation was used in smallpox, that a small dose you give, that has not been proved and that has not been accepted. It was initially proposed that let everybody be exposed to a minor amount of vaccine, minus amount of virus, and try to produce a healthy challenge. And then we are now containing another ethical issue is post-vaccine human challenge. To reduce the duration of manufacturing a vaccine, every company today in a phase 3 trial, once they have given a vaccine, they are doing a viral human challenge to see whether the persons acquire a disease or not. Remember, this is risky because if it produces inflammation and thrombosis, it may prevent the immunogenic property, but if it does not prevent the thrombogenic property, it may be lethal to the person. Remember, we already have seen 2 cases of transverse myelitis in Oxford vaccine, which I will discuss. And then vaccine healthy challenges in a resource limited countries where wife refuses to be isolated if the husband is positive and she says, let both of us get the infection at the same time. If one is getting infected, second automatically gets infected. This is vaccine, live vaccine as a whole. Now we come back to killed vaccine. Now this is the easiest way to make a vaccine. You just kill the virus using a formalin and alum and use it like a vaccine. This is the easiest way, the most easiest way to form, but it may not provide long-lasting immunity, may need a booster dose, may need several doses. The examples are hepatitis A, flu injection, polio injection, and rabies. Now, why I'm saying is this is the most easily made vaccine is evident from here that 5 of the 3 vaccines which have been approved for limited use till today are inactivated vaccines. So these 3 inactivated vaccines in China have been approved, available for marketing, available for distribution, and they have been used on the people. All of 3 are in a phase 3 simultaneously, but they have been passed for limited use. That means limited means they have been given an emergency approval for limited use in July. All 3 of them are using inactivated virus. These are inactivated viruses, which are killed viruses being used in these 3 conditions. These 3 viruses, Wuhan Institute, and this is a Sinovac, and this is a Sinopharm. All of them are using killed viruses with different types of reactions. All of them are showing positive results, and all 3 of them have been marketed. And then we have, sorry, it is inactivated, not attenuated, but killed coronavirus vaccines. There is a mistake in the word. Then we have these vaccines which are in phase 2. So remember, all of them are phase 3. So they are undergoing phase 3 trial, simultaneously have been used as an emergency approval for limited use since July. And these are the 2 phase 2, one phase 1, and the other are preclinical. They all are working on attenuated corona vaccines. Remember the second one, India is also working on a attenuated coronavirus vaccine. India also wanted to start the way phase 3. Before phase 3, they wanted to launch. They even announced that they may start the clinical use of this on 15th of August. But because of their hue and cry and ethical issues, this has been postponed to that now it will go back to a routine. Otherwise, they also wanted to use inactivated vaccine and accelerate the process of its implementation in the public. Now coming back to live attenuated vaccine means these are live vaccines. Virus is alive. They attenuate it by culturing it over fetal cell, over hen cell, over chicken cells, over so many cells. Repeatedly, when they culture it, the vaccine, the virus forgets its purpose of life and it changes its virulence and it changes its replicability. So this is a weakened or attenuated form of germ, creates a strong and long-lasting immune response, but takes a lot of time to make. No company is working on a live attenuated vaccine at the moment because everybody at the moment is interested in making a quick vaccine. MMR combined vaccine, rotavirus, smallpox, chickenpox, yellow fever are the examples. The only live attenuated vaccine which is under trial today is a BCG vaccine, and that too in Massachusetts General Hospital, which is undergoing phase 2 and phase 3 trial. This is not direct vaccine. This is an indirect vaccine to provide indirect immunity. Now come back to vectors. Now vectors are very, very, very important. Vector means that you are using one virus to transfer the gene, which can be recombinant gene or a part of the protein or the protein, and transfer it to the human beings. That's called as a vector. So when you make two viruses, you are using two viruses to make a third virus, which is called as a vaccine. And that virus can be live attenuated vaccine. Now this is going to be a live attenuated vaccine. And this virus, when you use, you have multiple choices. You can use a measles vector vaccine, or you can use an adenovirus. Adenovirus, you can use a human adenovirus or a chimpanzee or a gorilla adenovirus. When you use a chimpanzee adenovirus, and that's what Oxford vaccine is, they are using a vaccine of a adenovirus of chimpanzee, which doesn't affect the human being. And they are using that vaccine with the protein, the spike protein of adenovirus to make it into a vaccine. You can also use a adeno5 virus. So there are two viruses in adenovirus in human being used. One is adeno5 and second is adeno26. Adenovirus can be of multiple types, but the two most common use are adeno5 and adeno26. Now remember, if I use one adeno5 with the spike protein of coronavirus, it becomes one vaccine. If I use adeno5 with the recombinant spike of corona vaccine, it becomes second vaccine. If I use adeno5, in spite of adeno5, if I use adeno26, it becomes another vaccine. Now, what smartly Russia has done, Sputnik, they have used 2 doses of this vaccine. The first vaccine will be adeno5 and the second vaccine will be adeno26. That means they are using 2 doses of the vaccine. Both the vaccines will be different. The spike protein will be the same, but the adenovirus will be different. Normally, there are 50 different types of adenoviruses. They are choosing only 2 of them. Now, this is vector viruses and inactivated viruses are the front line in a vaccine. And you can see that 2 of these vaccines have been given permission for early use. Both of them are viral vector vaccines. One of them is using human adenovirus 5. The second one is using adenovirus 5 and adenovirus 26. The adenovirus 5 and 26 is Russian vaccine, and adenovirus 5 is a Chinese vaccine. Both of them are marketing very heavily, and many countries are tying up with them that they are better. Israel is working with Johnson & Johnson on adeno26. And here comes the most important virus, which is already in phase 2, phase 3 combined phase, which is likely to hit the market at the earliest. That is chimpanzee virus. Chimpanzee, AD means adeno, OX1, that means adenovirus OX1 is the type of virus of the chimpanzee. They are using this. Now they are in the front runner, but these virus vaccine in the trials in the phase 2 and in the phase 1 has created 2 patients with transverse myelitis. Both of them have been told to be, that means in 30,000 cases, normally a transverse myelitis with a vaccine should be 1 in 1 million. Whether they should have allowed to go to the third phase, we don't know. This is a matter of debate. Both the cases, they have labeled them as because of a multiple sclerosis. We as scientists, we basically feel that a non-human chimpanzee virus may precipitate transverse myelitis to much bigger extent. Only the time will tell us. So these are another viral vaccine they are using is gorillas instead of chimpanzee. Now these are the different other types of vaccines, of vector vaccines. One company is using weakened measles vaccine. One is using a vector vaccine as a pill. One is using a nasal spray vaccine for the flu based on a nasal vaccine. One is using a again as a pill that is called AD virus from San Francisco based company. And some people are using a modified vaccinia Ankara or MVA vaccine as a part of vector. There are many trials of vector induced which are going into preclinical stage. One of them is using the coronavirus gene fragments into the cells instead of using a protein. I said in a vector, in a virus, you can add a gene or you can add a spike protein. Now, when we come back to viral vector, you have two options. You are making them attenuated, but you can also make them, what do you mean by a viral vector? So if I use a adenovirus virus and take away its photocopier machine, which is called replicating gene. When I take the replicating gene and substitute it with the protein or the gene of the coronavirus, I make a vaccine. So instead of removing the replicating gene, if I partially remove the replicating gene, I produce more immunity. These are called as replicating viral vector vaccine versus non-replicating viral vector vaccine, where the virus inside does not replicate at all. Now I come back to the part of the vaccine. So I can use a protein, I can use a gene, I can use a part of the protein, multiple parts of the protein, tip of the protein. I can use different components, either them as it is, either recombinant or with polysaccharide or with as a conjugate vaccine. So these vaccines do not contain, these are the vaccines who do not contain the gene parts of it. Gene will be another subunit. So these are the vaccines which are used in shingle, meningococcal, pneumococcal, whooping, hepatitis B, Haemophilus influenza vaccine, etc. Now here again, I come back to any part of the vaccine, any part of the protein. If I use the nucleus, these are nuclear subparts. If I use the protein, these becomes the protein components of the vaccine. So most commonly it is the vaccine. Most commonly, it is the spike portion which they use to create various vaccines. These are called subunits. Now, subunit vaccines, they have proteins, but they have no genetic material. They can use them as total protein, as a nanoprotein. And then there are different types of phase trials going on. Vaccines by sticking protein into microscopic particles, viral proteins, and adding an adjuvant that stimulates the immune system. You have a RBD, instead of using the spike, you are using only the receptor binding domain, and then you are using the viral peptides or part of the vaccine of the protein. You are using proteins with adjuvant, which is GSK protein. And then you have some of the proteins from hepatitis B viruses assemble themselves into a hollow shell, and you add the RNA into that. Spike protein adjuvant made by British drug GSK, then viral proteins with an adjuvant species. Now, interesting. Canada-based Medigo with Philip Morris is using a species of tobacco to make vaccine. They deliver virus genes into the leaves, then the plant cells to create a protein shell that mimic viruses. And that's how they are making a vector type of a vaccine. So two companies are working on a tobacco as a vector. And then there are lots of other things who are making the subunits as a vector. Now, this is again protein. In total, 20 protein companies are working. Somebody is working on, again, spike protein, RBD section. That means 3 companies are working on receptor binding protein. This New York-based COVAX is using several viral proteins, not one. And the phase 1, this company for Germany is using 8 parts of 2 viral proteins. That means they are dividing the viral protein and taking out the component out of it. And these are the preclinical types going on, and they are working on a vector protein is a skin patch tipped with 400 tiny needles made of sugar, which will deliver the vaccine. Now coming back to the last portion, that is the genetic vaccine. Genetic vaccine is the genetic component which can be RNA or DNA. RNA means messenger RNA, which can be synthetic or which can be normal, or which can be a DNA plasmid under which you add the RNA, which is like a DNA viruses. Moderna, which is messenger RNA, is in the lead. This till today, a recombinant messenger RNA vaccines have not been available for any disease, but they are on a lead because they have shown both cellular and humoral antibodies. So they are using recombinant messenger RNA as a genetic vaccine without a protein. Then we have German company biotech. These are the two companies which are leading the genetic vaccines, the BioNTech plus Pfizer plus China drug maker already have sold millions of doses in anticipation they are going to work. So these are the two vaccines which are taking a lead. Third one is Indian vaccine maker Zydus Cadila, who is working on DNA base. And now these vaccine can be self-amplifying RNA vaccine, which is also in phase 2. And there is another company who is working on Japanese, who is working on DNA base. Now, there are many other companies who are working on different phases, self-replicating, which is a California-based company, American company. They are saying there's a DNA-based vaccine which will be delivered into the skin with electric pulses from a handheld device. And these are only to name that practically every company is working on these types of vaccines. These are the mRNA companies working. These are self-replicating RNA companies. These are the DNA vaccine companies, 5 of them. 6 of them are now recombinant, and these are the miscellaneous on these vaccines. Now, toxoid vaccines is the only field where people are not working because there is no toxins involved here. Intranasal, I've already shown that there are people using intranasal. So every vaccine now, they can produce oral, intranasal, others, universal vaccine, oral vaccine, adjuvant as a vaccine. Now, come back is a elderly. That's an issue with us. Most of the companies are not working on the elderly. That's also an ethical issue because they want to bring a vaccine early. If they start doing a vaccine on the elderly, it will take time. So maybe the first generation of vaccines may not be applicable on elderly. All of them are not doing trials on the elderly, but that is a requirement. If they don't find that elderly, it is not going to cause any effect, then they may have to try a higher dose version as it is being done in influenza vaccine, or they may have to use a single protein from coronavirus, the spike protein, surrounded by 2 powerful adjuvants similar to shingles vaccine, which is Shingrix. And therefore, they may have to modify their trial for the elderly. So I am skeptical in the first phase whether you will actually get a vaccine for the elderly or not. Whether you want vaccine 1 or 2 is a controversy because sometimes you use 2 doses, 3 doses. Sometimes the time may tell us, can I use 2 vaccines, first dose from one vaccine, second dose from another company? Can I use, like Sputnik is doing, 1 vaccine from 1 coronavirus, 2nd vaccine from 2nd coronavirus? These are all ethical issues, matter of concern, under research. I'm not going into the detail, but examples are there in this particular slide. So let me just finish up by saying that you can use a second vaccine like hepatitis B. You can use a second vaccine from a different company, and you can use, so therefore, these are all which I wanted to come back. Now coming to the ethical issues in this particular thing, I just want to enumerate all of them. One is a fetal cell line, which people are trying to use. Second is the trials. People have launched the vaccine without doing a post phase 4 surveillance, even phase 3 trial. They have directly launched in a phase 1, phase 2 trial. Most of the companies are doing phase 1 and phase 2 directly. They are given a clearance for transverse myelitis much earlier than they would have expected. They are not following the side effects with that. And another thing which comes is a human challenge which is happening, and who will get the supply is going to be $1 million question after the vaccine is introduced. Say, for example, India today have said that they will be distributing only 20% of the population will be receiving the vaccine in phase 1, only 20%. That means 80% of the population may not receive. That is 25 crores is 25 crores is 250 million people will receive this vaccine in the first phase. And Indian population is 6 times that. So these are the ethical issues which I wanted to talk about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Agarwal. I think you took us from the simple and the basic to the very latest of what is happening in the world. And I think it was quite lucid and well brought out in your familiar style. If I could just put forward a couple of questions that have come in on the chat, sir. Could you take those questions now, please?
Please.
Yeah. One question that we had received earlier was, we keep hearing this word herd immunity being coming up in the media and in a lot of chats, and a lot of people have this doubt. If you could shed some light on herd immunity and where exactly do we stand, or what is the hope of any herd immunity as far as COVID
So
goes?
the herd immunity concept came, it's an old concept, it's a new one. So we need to understand the word R0 or R0. R0 is the value that number of infections a virus will do to number of people will get infected with 1%. Then we have RT. RT will vary from area to area. That means R0 over time. That means you say RT of New York, RT of Israel is so much, but R value is a universal value for the whole world. And the R value has been designated as 2.6. The formula for herd immunity is R0 minus 1 divided by R0, which is 2.6 minus 1 divided by 2.6, which becomes 67%. That means 67% of the community has to be infected before herd immunity comes, either alone or with vaccine. That's one. Number two is the model of New York has shown that when 25% of the people get seroprevalence, the first wave will go out, be over. The minimum requirement for the first wave of the infection is 25%, because that's what happened in New York. And with that, we compared it with other countries and we saw the same response. In Delhi, in Mumbai, in Pune, in Indore, Ahmedabad, we saw the same response, that when 25% of the population achieved seroprevalence, the number of new cases, the positivity rate started coming down. So maybe 25% is the first phase, and then it becomes slow. That means first 25% infection seropositivity may be higher, then it slowly grows up. In Delhi, in India, in Delhi, we are now approximately 30%. That means after 20%, it has gone very slow, the positivity rate. You will not be able to achieve a herd immunity by a normal infection per se. You will require the effort of a vaccine. Vaccine plus natural cases will do. The international survey is, the Indian national survey is only 7%. We have many states, we have 25%, but 7%. In other countries, it varies, somewhere 5%, somewhere 10%. So herd immunity is very, very, very far away. But the question also comes is reinfection. We have documented 4 cases in healthcare workers who got reinfection within 1 month, and they developed a D614G mutation. And they did develop a disease which was severe but not serious. So therefore, reinfection is also a possibility. And we really don't know whether this vaccine will prevent us, 1 vaccine, 2 vaccine, booster vaccine, whether it will prevent the post-vaccine antibody enhancement or not, whether it will prevent the immunogenicity or not, whether this vaccine in children will prevent multi-system inflammatory disease, we don't know. So everything is a big, we don't know at the moment. There are many unknowns which are still unknown, though we know many unknown which are known today.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Derek, can you ask
yes.
Dr. Yeah, Dr. Iran, yeah. You got more questions? Dr. Delan is telling this. Doctor, have you got more questions?
Yes, there was one more question which had come up,
Yeah.
in fact, from the YouTube live streaming. And it goes like this, sir. Could you throw some more light on the furin proteases and furin cleavage sites? And how does this impact future research and vaccine development?
When we talk about the spike protein, let me go back to that slide. Let me go back to that slide. It will take half a minute. So when you go back to this slide, the second part of it, the bottom two are MERS virus comparison. The bottom type, you can see here the SARS-CoV-2 S protein, which has the two important component is FP and RBM. Now, RBM now when we say, for example, we have why D614 gene mutation is not that deadly because it is not involving the RBM portion. If a mutation would involve an RBM, we will end up into a very dangerous virus. And that virus is neither involving RBM, not the fusion protein. Now let's see how it works. Now this is a spike protein, and here RBM is used to enter, and the FP is used where this wall fuses with the wall of the virus. So I'm a little bit surprised why FP has not been used as an antigenic structure for making a vaccine. At the moment, I have not read that somebody is working on an FP. Maybe that may be one of the area where you can use it as a, because if you can block this either as a drug or as a vaccine, you are not allowing the virus to come in. So that's the membrane fusion which happens is the FP, is the fusion cleavage.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, sir. And just a clarification again from General Jim James. He just wanted a clarification on the fact that the second dose of the COVID-19, could it be of a different brand or should it be very brand specific? You mentioned that there are vaccines where you could change hepatitis B.
Let me clarify. The India case of 4 cases of reinfection have proved all 4 out of the 4 doctors who developed reinfection, 3 of them did not have antibodies, neutralizing antibodies after the first infection. And with the second infection, within days, they developed the neutralizing antibodies. So you can imagine them as a vaccine, that they received 2 vaccines. First vaccine did not produce an infection. Second reinfection was the second vaccine. So that has also proved that second vaccine is required. Now there is a debate. The Russia says 2 vaccines can be different. They are using AD5 and AD26. That means first dose and second dose, they are using the same spike protein, but adenovirus, they are using it differently. So they have opened the hope that why can't you use a different type of a brand the next time? Yes, it is happening in hepatitis B. It is happening in many other conditions where you try to change the brand. That will have to come back from a company to tell us whether it is a brand specific or not. Because most of the companies will say Rabipure in a rabies, they say we are not brand specific. They say you can interchange the brands, but many years they say you don't change the brand. So, this will be a part of debate and manufacturers' instructions. Then only you can say we're changing the brand. Because when you are changing the brand, you don't know what you are changing, what component of a protein you are changing. Maybe both of them may be using a spike protein, but in nanograms, there may be a difference in nanograms. So there may be a difference in antigenicity.
Right. Dr. Prabha Swaminathan wanted to know, what about MMR as a solution?
There are
for
indirect vaccines. There are indirect vaccines being on trial, MMR, BCG. Both of them are a indirect usage. Like a BCG, you are also using MMR to give you indirect immunity. Now let us understand the concept behind MMR and BCG. When you give a vaccine, it is supposed to produce interferon 1. Interferon 1 is supposed to produce gamma interferon, and gamma interferon is supposed to kill the virus. Therefore, production of interferon 1 will prevent another viral infection for next 3 months. That's what the basis is. But this virus is behaving mischievously. It is not allowing enough interferon to form. Therefore, after COVID-19, you are still prone to get other co-infections. Therefore, if I give a interferon, if I produce enough interferon 1 by giving BCG or MMR, then I may be able to assist the new virus in reducing the complication. That's the assumption. So assumption is
Right.
before you acquire COVID-19, if you take any other injection, can be flu, can be pneumonia, can be pneumococcal, then can be any MMR, if you take that, that produces enough interferon 1, and that will produce enough gamma interferons, which will protect you or will make the disease less serious for the next 3 months. That's what the basis is.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Finally, we just have a comment and a question both together. In fact, this was Dr. Osahon Enabulele. Pardon if I'm pronouncing it wrong.
I think
Who's
KK knows.
President of the Commonwealth Medical Association and coordinator of the Coalition of African National Medical Associations. And they wanted to know whether you have any perspective and suggestions on development of vaccines in Africa, sir.
I will not know what is the current situation in Africa, because most of the companies, most of the people at this moment, companies are placing orders for the research. So I will not know what is the current situation in Africa.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank
so
you, sir. Thank you for
the
that,
person
sir.
who has asked question has some comment to make, because mostly people who ask question, they have at least some knowledge. So they may be able to say that.
Yes, we'll just see if
we'll
the person
ask-
can come on screen. We'll try and get them on, sir.
Okay,
Back to you, Dr. Russell. Yes.
Now we'll have Dr. Ilana, who's chairing this. Back to you for your comment and your taking it forward. But
This,
yeah, go ahead.
Dr. KK Agarwal's lecture was amazing, incredibly comprehensive and very, very clear. And I think it brought us up to speed for the rest of the discussion today. And now I'd like to introduce the second lecturer of the day. That's Dr. Mahendra Patel. He's a member of the National Board of the Royal Pharmaceutical Society and an honorary visiting professor at the University of Bradford, and also an adjunct professor of pharmacy at the Wilkes University in Pennsylvania in America. And in Britain, he's a member of the Royal Pharmaceutical Society. He's a fellow of NICE, which is an acronym for the National Institute for Healthcare and Excellence. It's an organization that's trying to improve health and social care through evidence-based guidance. And I think we're also, one of the things that was emphasized in Dr. Agarwal's lecture was the idea of evidence-based science. And he's also a fellow of the Higher Education Academy. And we'd like him to speak today to give us an overview of pharmacological issues in regarding delivery of any appropriate vaccines that are developed actually to the people wherever they live. And how can you maintain the efficacy of the vaccine from the time it leaves the factory to the time it reaches each patient, even in a rural village, someplace in Africa, to make it maybe perhaps the most difficult thing. Is Dr. Patel?
Can you unmute yourself? Yeah.
Yes, I'm unmuting. It seems my slides are not sharing, so I'll have to go back in.
It shared for a minute, sir. If you could just try again.
Said, yeah, we tried again.
It was visible once.
Yeah, let me just check again, because it's not doing it. Could you see it earlier on?
Yeah,
we saw it earlier for a minute, sir.
Yeah, it's showing an error now. So.
Okay, I'll just make you the host, sir, but you'll have to make me co-host for a minute.
Derek, I've already made him the co-host.
No, he was. I think
Oh,
possibly
let
if you were
me try again. Dr. Russell, let me try again. See what
Yeah,
happens.
just try again. Yeah.
Um, share. No, it's not doing it.
just a minute. So let me just try by making you a host. Can you just try now, sir?
I am getting into the, okay,
Yes. Just full screen now, please.
hold on. I'll go from the slideshow itself, see if it will go
Yeah.
from. Can you see?
Perfect. Wonderful. Yes.
Thank
Please
you.
go
So,
ahead.
apologies for the delay there in the IT glitch. What a delight it was to hear Dr. Agarwal, but and an honor. Just to say thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to present in front of such an esteemed audience and panelists. Thank you, Professor Russell D'Souza, Professor Derek D'Souza, and Professor Mary Matthews on this platform. And also our distinguished speakers, and it's been very invigorating to listen to them all in the different fashion. Dr. James, Professor Raymond Swinton, Professor Alana Bellmaker, and of course, Dr. Agarwal. I shall give you a little bit of a perspective from the pharmacy side, and I think it's more the broader aspect of it is not changing my slides. Dr. D'Souza, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can all hear you, and we can see your slide.
Yeah, it's not. Can you see that the? Is it going to be a problem? I'll tell you what. I shall stop sharing, and then I'll just give the talk if that's the case.
Yeah, that's fine.
Here we are. Can you see that slide?
Yeah, we can.
Okay. So I'll keep going as I can. I've been asked to keep, this is a very brief one, so I'll give a whistle-stop tour in terms of what's happening, really. I think we need to be understanding what the myths are. And I think that if we don't solve the problems around the myths, then our actual mission against tackling this corona pandemic becomes even more greater, really. Some things around what is happening in Europe from a manufacturing, transport and supply system, the situation in UK, we're ready to go, it seems. And the equity and availability and supplies. And we also have the intellectual property rights that I'll talk about. And the other thing is the pharmacy perspective globally in terms of safety and quality assurance. But one thing we have to measure is the workforce development. And that is absolutely key in moving forward. I think my slides are going to take a little bit time to change. Okay, so these are the vaccine myths, and I think it's important that we all understand what the vaccine myths are, really. The anti-vaxxer groups claim the vaccine will kill millions. And what do? I think we as healthcare professionals and as an industry fighting against the corona pandemic, we need to bring out the facts and the process behind rigorous clinical trials in assuring people. Some of the myths are that it will, Bill Gates plans to use the vaccines to implant trackable microchips in people. And I think, is it something, an area where we need to promote the facts against the myths and promote them widely, really? Because as such, there is unfounded claim to that. There's no evidence, very unlikely. There are areas where, and particularly not just in the UK, but in the Asian continent, in the African continent, and worldwide, really, among some groups of people, that if the vaccine will give you coronavirus and will make you ill, as we all know, and we've heard so much, that it's just mild symptoms in people which usually clear up within a few days. and then the vaccine is rushed through clinical trials and will therefore not be safe. Well, we know the process in terms of the trials and doing parallel trials as well, really, amongst the different phases. So perhaps this is an area where we need to showcase where we are. We're producing vaccines within 12 to 18 months. Now, we've seen this journey and we all know about the journey, and we've mentioned, and we've heard Dr. Agarwal as well, but it's reported 60 to 70% of the population would have to be immune, either as a result of natural infection or vaccination, to achieve the herd immunity where the question was asked. This equates to around 5.6 billion people worldwide, which could take years. WHO doesn't expect widespread dissemination of a COVID-19 vaccine until the 2021 at the earliest, as we've seen so much. So this is the challenge that we're up against. From a European perspective, politics plays a part as well, really. And we have the Brexit, the famous Brexit, and in terms of how UK stand from that perspective. And this also creates the issues around transfer of medicines and vaccinations. And now we're back into the negotiations around how the UK belong and the deal or no deal. Then perhaps it's something that we need to be mindful of, how we're going to be making sure that there is two-way, an equal and effective and efficient transfer amongst the countries, really. The politics of access, and we have the COVAX system, the organization which brings together governments, global health organizations, leading manufacturers, companies, scientists from all over in terms of ensuring equal access, really. Not everybody are participating in this, but these are all participant countries, regardless of their levels of income. It is a drive to ensure vaccines, everybody have equal access once they are developed. And the aim is to have 2 billion doses by the end of 2021, which should be enough to protect those in high risk and vulnerable. The facility continually monitors the COVID-19 vaccine landscape to identify the most suitable vaccine candidate based on scientific merit. You've heard today, and obviously there's no point me laboring this because it's already been mentioned, the UK now, the hopes have grown in terms of coronavirus by Easter with a massive rollout of vaccines completed in 3 months as it's been reported, really. Intellectual property rights. South Africa and India urge World Trade Organization to waive some of the trade agreements governing the IP rights so that medicinal products can be more easily accessed, especially by low-income countries. Is this something that we need to discuss, look at, share wider, and would that be the best in the interest? And how do we play for that? I know South Africa and India are certainly making a clear stance for that. And is it a case that more wider countries need to be involved in waiving those IP rights to get those vaccinations out quickly, effectively, and to the people that most need it, really? And then there is the approach around who gets the vaccines first. So the Strategic Advisory Group of the World Health Organization prioritizing healthcare workers and those in frontline jobs. Now, there's a tiered approach with this, and it's also joining a draft panel assembled by the US National Academy of Sciences, Engineering and Medicine, and it's a 5-phase tiered approach. My question here, and it's worth considering, is in the phase 1, so you can see from phase 1 to how we are going to phase those vaccines in, because not everybody are going to get those vaccines all at the same time. Healthcare workers and first responders. What does that actually mean? And who are healthcare workers? We have constantly battled in putting pharmacy on the platform globally, not just from a European perspective, from an Asian perspective, but globally. Is this something that we need to make a united approach? And perhaps is this through the platform that we are working on, Department of Education, Bioethics at UNESCO here, is this something that we can look at in more detail, that pharmacists have to be on there in terms of ensuring that? And that also takes away the various factors in terms of those phase 1 frontline workers, whether they've got underlying risks, whether they've got, you know, within certain communities, it's been shown that people from Black and Asian minority ethnic group are more susceptible and having more adverse effects. Is being a pharmacist equal to putting that at risk? And everybody are at the same point at that point. What we're doing in the UK is a national an NHS COVID-19 vaccine research registry, because as we've mentioned, if we don't gather the intelligence and the database against those anti-vaxxers as well as part of the lobbying, we are not going to get enough information. So we've got a digital register here that's been promoted through pharmacy and healthcare professionals and sits on the NHS Well platform, where we sign up volunteers and we can see that here we are, we're ready to go really. So in brief regarding the vaccines, to date, one corona vaccine has been approved, that's the Sputnik 5, formerly known as Gamma COVID Vac, developed by the Gamaleya Research Institute in Moscow. And experts and scientists from all over have raised considerable concern regarding its safety, but no one has shown, but today, no one has shown vaccine efficacy, and that's where we need to look at and table that whilst we're all in the fight to get this vaccine out. No one has demonstrated the vaccine protects people against infection in the phase 3 trial, and that's absolutely key. And ultimately, public trust is going to be paramount to the success of the vaccine. So we talked about, through the herd community, is it that the vaccine alone is not going to be enough? Is it that the herd immunity is not going to be enough in any way to get round? And do we need a herd immunity plus the vaccine? So very quickly to move on, the COVID-19 vaccines have been backed by the UK and when we might get them. Now, this is the situation as we currently stand, and you can see this is very fresh. UK has ordered 340 million doses of COVID-19 vaccine from 6 manufacturers, 6 candidates that will prove successful in large clinical trials over the next few months, really. It's hedging its bets, placing orders for such a large amount of different doses, different vaccines, etc. If they all prove successful, this would be enough to provide a dose to more than 5 times the UK population. But this outcome is unlikely, really. And this is the vaccine portfolio of the 340 million that we've already ordered. And is this a practice that's going on elsewhere, and in what size that we need to look at? The key part where pharmacists play a part is from the manufacturer to the wholesalers, to the pharmacy, to the patient. How do we get it out there? And the challenges, they cannot be underestimated in any way, really. And the scaling up of the manufacturing, how are we going to get those? The phasing, we've seen the 5-phase method, but it's this last mile, as we call it. Realistically, for everybody to get a vaccine today, the 5 or 6 biggest manufactured vaccine produce less than half of this volume in a year. So it's not just producing billions of doses of vaccine, but also need the other sides of it, like the manufacturing of the glass vials, the logistics, the storage, the distribution, and the training behind that process. Who is providing those training across that board? And where is that training? Should we be planning that? And where is that training process planned? And rather than having it at the end when the horse has bolted. The challenges that ahead continue. Conducting clinical trials, achieving reliable outcomes may become difficult as countries are start to flatten out and the trial participants lessen exposed to a certain risk of infection. The storage and shipping requirements. Some vaccines, this is important, some vaccines require minus 80 degrees centigrade. How are we going to ensure that that happens from the journey that I said, from the hauliers to the warehouses, and even to the pharmacies itself, really? Do we have that? And what about in some of the lower income countries that lack the infrastructure and resources to store such vaccines? We've heard about the Moderna vaccines, current coronavirus shot rollouts could freeze up citing cold store needs, really, because this is a huge area where we need to look at the vaccine storage conditions. Now, is there anywhere where we have, what are the storage requirements as a whole that we need to produce and work on in terms of the different requirements for the different vaccines? And I've just placed some of those on there. Pharmacy considerations is a prescribing aspect. Whilst vaccines, assuming that there will be choices, should be administered to patients, what safety and efficacy criteria should be applied in such decisions, really, in terms of what about patients' reactions, what about certain groups, what about people from different cultural backgrounds, etc. And what drugs should be prescribed in the mitigation and the treatment of a COVID-positive patient? And should only authorised drugs be prescribed, e.g. no off-label use? What clinical markers establish the basic level of patient evaluation of use of vaccines and medicines? And is there, and the particular vulnerable patient for whom the vaccine and or medication might not be suitable or recommended that we need to look at? We've just mentioned, we've heard that the older people are not getting into, they will not be having the vaccines. Are we then looking at the most vulnerable and leaving them behind? And the documentation system needs to be in place for each patient, which might be further used for patient evaluation and monitoring. The preparation and dispensing, how will we access to vaccines and medicine for COVID treatment be assured to all peoples in a given country? And what are the advocacy efforts should the profession, the pharmacy profession should be engaged to ensure an ethical foundation, including payment for access to these agents? Perhaps payment needs to be considered. Will the pharmacy workforce, is it effectively trained, utilised, including immunising patients, in order to assure meeting community immunisation goals? We have seen we need to extend that workforce if we're going to meet the targets that's being put out. And how will off-label prescribing utilisation of unapproved, unsubstantiated treatments be managed by pharmacists? The authoritative and clinically substantiated source of information need to be utilised to guide the counselling and advising of patients. What have we got in terms of counselling those patients? And that's a key part, that pharmacists need to be in that chain at this point in time, particularly during that last mile. Is there a fundamental core of information that must be given to every patient, allowing for individualisation where we need to? And is it something that we need to put as a standard template, working together, bringing the bodies together and the different countries? And how do we as the profession assure public and patient understanding related to the use of vaccines and authorized medicine without the untold, unfounded evidence, the myths that go around and the misinformation, and the tools that are necessary for pharmacist counselling? Perhaps pictorial evidence can be where language can be a problem. And have we looked at that, and particularly in the African and other countries that are not so well resourced, where we produce something like that and take into account people's attitudes? The monitoring of the pharmacovigilance becomes absolutely key. We don't know yet in terms of the multiple doses, of the follow-up doses. Are we going to get enough people following up? And this is an area where pharmacists have got to be part of that wider delivery of the vaccines, really, in terms of the program, from a global perspective.
Mahendra, can I? We are running out of time. Can I ask you to please come that out, please? We're going to finish up now. Yeah.
Here we go. And this is just to give you a call to action that's just come out now from the FIP, where I'm a member as well, is to ensure equity and access to disease prevention, to include greater investment in vaccines and vaccination services by community pharmacists. And that's a call to action from there. This is just to quickly show the wider, the UK government at the moment is looking at extending the people that can vaccine. That includes non-healthcare professionals as well. But this could be rolled out to the wider team, pharmacists, pharmacy technicians, and that's under discussion at the moment. I'd like to thank everybody, and also my international panel of pharmacists at the UNESCO Chair of Bioethics Programme, where we're producing a guidance, hopefully that will share some light and benefit everybody around the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ilana, are you?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would like to thank Professor Patel for a magnificent lecture. His lecture really complemented that of Dr. K.K. Agarwal and gave us a lot of the practical aspects of trying to roll out the vaccine and getting it to everyone in the world, and also many of the ethical issues of how do we choose who gets the vaccine first. And you raised, both of you raised a lot of different and very, very important ethical questions. And if you don't mind, I'd like to take my privilege of asking perhaps the first question. And I'd like to ask it to both of our main speakers, Dr. K.K. Agarwal and also to Professor Patel. And I'd like to ask whether you think it's ethically possible to give emergency, a lot of the vaccines that get emergency use authorization before they finished every little trial they usually do. That's to shorten the space, the time of development from 10 years to 1 year, 1.5 years. Do you think it's ethical to give emergency use authorization to any vaccine that has not been tested in high risk groups?
Dr. KK here. So these are in a pandemic, all the rules and regulations are to be decided by the nation. Say, for example, in India, we have an epidemic act and we have a act which is a National Disaster Act. Under that, government can acquire the powers to decide what they want to. That's what they do. That's what they are doing. They're using different powers under a disaster and allowing things which may be slightly unethical, but they are justifying it for a broader good. That's how they do.
Okay. Professor Patel?
Yes. Professor Ilana, that's a very good question, really. And it raises lots of issues in terms of individual countries will have their individual stances. And I think it's not a one size fits all. I think that's something that's important. Whilst the question is generic, we have to look at those individual countries, the policies, requirements. And also we need to look at what is the beliefs and attitudes of the audience and how well informed are they? Because as Dr. Agarwal so well articulated, for example, in India, 1.4 billion people, then you have to take a different measure perhaps to get everybody out in an appropriate time. We all have to work together on this, but we still need to ensure that whilst we're cutting corners, that the safety of the patient is still monitored, is not undermined in any way, and that has to be at the forefront before we make any decisions moving forward.
Ilana, I want to add one thing is that future, the most important thing will be pharmaceuticals fighting with each other that I am better than others. If you see the website of the Russian vaccine, they already have started talking about why they are better than the adenovirus, human adenovirus, and they started. So the future most important things will be that if you get a side effect, the other company will say and exacerbate that side effect. So companies fighting with each other for their existence is going to be the most important issue in future. That every company is going to say, I am better, I am better, I am better. So that portion, doctors now, the companies will roll in doctors all over the world. They will start saying this vaccine is better, this vaccine is better. So that fight is for me much more important than availability of the vaccine. People are going to be confused. Who is saying what? Somebody says I'm better. And if one vaccine causes one more transverse myelitis in India, you had it. If you get one vaccine producing one side effect, it will click on the other pharmaceutical, will say this vaccine has caused this. So I think that issue also needs a discussion.
I think you raised an extremely important point. This whole COVID-19 pandemic has caused chaos all over the world and has showed all the fractures in societies all over the world and all the weak spots all over the world. And you now mentioned another very, very important weak spot. And of course, with the spread of social media, you're certainly correct in your prediction that one company will be attacking others about any side effect that's reported. And we could have it could really affect the trust and belief in the common person about the safety of vaccines, and they're willing to receive vaccines. I see that Professor Patel would like to also respond to what you said.
Just to add on to that, Professor Lana, is that also we have got a growing number of groups and people and volumes in terms of anti-vaxxers as well. And it's how we manage that information that we have to be careful. I agree with Dr. Agarwal, there is the competition and my vaccine is better than somebody else's, but it's how those people, the other side of the fence and the people on that are going to react to that and then steer away from vaccines altogether, really. So there's a huge danger. And you touched on the social media platform. Social media platform, that is a huge platform. It's a world on its own, really. And this news travels as fast within seconds before we can blink our eyelids. So it is important that we manage that, we monitor that, and there has to be some efficacy in terms of how we share those results and information.
I'd like to ask my next question to perhaps the general audience, and that is that we see that many of the young people especially say, why we don't care if we get sick or not. If we get infected, because we have very small chance of having any serious illness. And let's just go ahead and get herd immunity. And maybe the old people and the people with the pre-existing conditions can hide at home for a few months, and maybe we can reach herd immunity, and that'll take care of the problem. And I think we should. I know that Dr. KK addressed that in his talk, but I think we should talk about whether it's ethical to encourage. Is it ethical to encourage any kind of model that might encourage infections? I know some people mislabel the Swedish model as encouraging herd immunity. They deny that, but it is a topic that is on the table in public discussions. If anybody would like to respond to that.
That's what is called
KK, I think Dr. KK, you can this whole concept of herd immunity came from Sweden, but also from UK. The initial phase was talking about this herd immunity. But from what Dr. Agarwal just said, there is no such, without the vaccine, I don't think herd immunity is possible. Is that right, Dr. K? Can you elaborate?
One is that this virus is so unpredictable. There has been a paradigm shift in our understanding. Now, even if you expose everybody for a condition called variolation, what about second infection? What about third infection? Because now every mutated, you are getting second infection. So that's only a theoretical thing. I don't think so that will happen. It was there till you used to say that the second infection will not occur. Now, when we know that second infection is occurring, all of us are seeing second infection. I think thinking about them is, I think it will be a futile exercise if we start thinking of a natural human challenge to everybody. This used to be in India for rubella. There used to be rubella parties for unmarried girls. Still, rubella vaccine was available. This was a routine in smallpox in India, where a small dose was injected in human being before the smallpox vaccine was available. But I don't think so. We already have crossed 9 months now. At this particular moment, we have to concentrate on a vaccine than on a natural infection. But in smaller places, like I gave an example of a husband and a wife, in a smaller place, some people will do it out of choice, but those of them will be uneducated. Those of them will be like they will say, see, one person of the family has already got it, let others also get it if they get it. Another thing which is coming in a term is a masking. Masking is that when you wear a mask, and if you get a disease, you get a less infectious disease with a mild disease or asymptomatic disease. So let there be a herd immunity or towards herd immunity with masking, which is called as a natural vaccine. Because if everybody is wearing a vaccine, people are going to get specifically in high density areas, then the disease will become asymptomatic. The virus in will be lower in quantity, but the virus out may be still, so you may still be contagious. So universal masking is also defined as a natural viral challenge with low virus dose.
KK, Ilana, can I ask a question?
Yes, please. Of course.
KK, we talked about the vaccine. What about you have now 4 or 5 mutations that have been identified? Is that right, or even more by now? What happens to the immunity if you take the vaccine? Are we going to be immune to all the mutations?
So therefore, mutations are 2 per month. 12 mutations have already occurred. The original virus is no more there. The latest is D614G. But what they are finding is when you substitute D with G, that is aspartic acid with glycine, the immunogenicity is not changing. So unless the virus immunogenicity change, the same vaccine still will work. And when I show one slide of a universal vaccine, is a company is trying to involve all the strains of the virus to produce a vaccine, like an influenza vaccine. So the first vaccine will never be the best vaccine. The first vaccine, as per CDC and WHO, even if it gives 50% response, they will allow them to be launched. The second or the third vaccine will be a researched vaccine. That is the vaccine people are looking for, the second generation and the third generation. And by that time, we would come to know whether you require different strains of virus in the same vaccine or not. So as on today, the current statistics, the current literature shows that all the mutations are occurring not in the receptor binding domain and fusion protein. Therefore, antigenicity is not changing. So unless you demonstrate a different antigenicity of a vaccine, which is requiring for the purpose of production of antibodies. So at this moment, except for 1 or 2 companies, nobody is working on universal vaccine. They all are working on one strain.
Thank you. I'd like to ask one more general question, and then perhaps our other panel members would like to ask their questions, or perhaps Dr. Derek D'Souza can take questions from the audience. I'd like to talk about the ethical principle of distributive justice. And I was very disturbed to hear, and I read it in the newspaper already, about how several countries in the world are buying up already huge quantities of any future vaccine. The United States is doing it, Britain is doing it. I'm sure Russia is making sure it has plenty of supply for its people, the vaccine it's developing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, I have a vision of the rich countries of the world having all the vaccines and the poor countries being left with very, very little. And I'd like to talk about distributive justice and how the WHO or some kind of a consortium, or how we can contribute to making sure the vaccines are available to get out to other people in the world, and not just the rich countries. I open it for general discussion.
Because I have to go, I just want to add one thing, Russell, because I have to leave in 2 minutes. So this is the countries, why countries are not uniting together and making a single vaccine is because everybody's first intention is to improve their economy. So at this moment, the economy of a country depends upon their vaccine. So that's the reason they are trying to sell it to the richer companies so that the companies and their economy improves. And that fight will carry on. I don't think so in this particular moment. All the countries are, say, for example, Russia, China, they all are doing, their priority is improving their economy. So I don't think so anybody can force them that you reserve these for a poor nation. They may not. They may not even have a differential price for the poor countries. At this moment, because of a disaster, their primary aim is to make money.
Yeah, I think there is a COVAX, isn't it? Something that they all are contributing. But there is a question here, KK, before you go. Would you comment on the ethics regarding vaccine nationalism from Nepal? Dr. Dharna has asked you to comment on vaccine nationalism.
Means what does exactly he mean by that?
Well, I just saw this question. I'm wondering what
exactly he wants to say about nationalism.
Oh.
But there may be different interpretations of that. Maybe Derek wants to answer that.
Yeah, Dr. Dhanarathna has put that question asking KK to comment on what is probably the same thing, I suppose, that my country first or something like that. No?
Dr. Patel,
This is
if you
when a
could
country
just,
manages to secure doses of vaccine for its own citizen or residents and prioritizes its own. That means my own, that means a company say for example, I think what he's feeling is that if I am a company making it in India, then my country is forcing me not to export it. Probably that's nationalism. That means my people and my country is not allowing me to sell it or make it available to other countries.
Wow.
That will be only which I can answer it as a nationalism, because that's what a movement is. That because this movement is there, which happened with the mask. When your own country doesn't have the mask, why are you allowing it to be exported? So that thing probably will again fundamental the legal laws of the nation and the laws will prevail over this particular thing.
All right, thank you for that.
Thank you, everybody, for giving me this opportunity. There's a back-to-back program for me in the next 1 minute. So I apologize for leaving in between, but thank you for giving me the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
KK. Thank you, KK, for coming so many times on. We look forward to having you here. You're part of the UNESCO program anyway.
Thank you.
So, yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, Dr. Elana, you could, if there's any other questions, we'll.
I thought that perhaps Derek, he's been monitoring the questions in the chat on the chats. That perhaps
no, I don't think. I think we've covered all the questions by far. Even some of them which had come. Dr. Agarwal had covered that soon after his talk. So I don't think, in case somebody has a question and would like to ask, or
I would just
maybe
they have comments been. I see that Dr. James left the room for a moment, but perhaps Professor Ray Switton can have a few comments as one of the discussants before we sign off.
And I think, Mary, you can thank everyone in the end. Ray, you can, your comments on behalf of our Society of Disaster Medicine and Public Health.
Thank you so much for that opportunity for some remarks. This has been an incredibly informative conversation. This is something that is near and dear to each of us, both personally as we place ourselves in the midst of caring for the patients, as well as from our family and community perspectives as we try to care and protect our own loved ones and those around us. And it does impact the many things that we've said, going from literally our personal health to the economies of our countries are at stake during this time. To the experts on the panel today, your wisdom, your knowledge, and sharing your expertise so willingly is so appreciative. I can't express enough the gratitude in hearing and learning. And every time I hear these experts speak, I glean a little more understanding of this very complex issue and all the many things that go into encompassing what we are facing. To all of the people that are attending today, on behalf of the Society of Disaster Medicine Public Health, I just want to say thank you so much. And to our UNESCO friends and the chairs here representing this ethics committee, we are so grateful for the opportunities that you are presenting. This topic and many others in this series have simply been enlightening to the literal world on what is current, what is important, and where we should be focusing our attention and our learning. To that, we are all grateful. On behalf of myself and my own institution, thank you for the opportunity to be here today. I see Dr. James has rejoined us here, and I will pass the baton over to him for his final remarks and comments.
I apologize. I had to step away on another phone call I had scheduled. At any rate, I just echo what Ray said, but I would like to underscore at least what we are trying to represent, and that is global integration. And I think without that, many of the questions brought up today just can't be answered satisfactorily. We can answer them from an ethical viewpoint, but we can't really answer them from a practical viewpoint. And so what we want to do is build on these experiences to try and achieve some type of global consensus going forward that truly integrates the medical community to better take care of global health security. And with that, I know we all have to get on with our days. I'm so thankful to Dr. D'Souza for being the tip of the spear, so to speak, with these webinars. And we look forward to the continuing dialogue. And I do invite everyone on the phone out there interested in working with us, please go to our website and check out how you can participate with us to hopefully build a better future. Thank you.
Thank you all. And Dr. Mary, I'll hand over to you now on behalf of. Can you hear me?
Thank you, Dr. Russell. And on behalf of the Department of Education of the UNESCO Chair in Bioethics, HIFA, I thank our esteemed panelists, Dr. K.K. Agarwal, Dr. Mahindra Patel, for such a beautiful, informative talk about vaccines and even the ethical challenges that we are going to face when the vaccine is going to come out. So I thank both of you, and there are a lot of appreciation coming from all our participants. And thank you also, Professor Ilana Belmaker, for chairing this session, and to Professor James and Professor Ray for joining hands with us, with the UNESCO chair, to take the cause of ethics forward, solidarity in COVID-19, and for the continued participation in these webinars. And I thank all the attendees for your valuable questions. And I thank Dr. Derek for monitoring the chat box. And of course, Dr. Russell, thank you for always leading from the front. And with that, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Dr. Mary, Derek. It was great to have James and Ray and the disaster and the Society for Disaster Medicine and Public Health join us in bringing this. I think we both can bring to our organizations together with the ethical aspects, and we cover all these areas. And Dr. Ilana, thank you for chairing. You also thank you for teaching and being part of the education. You take. She does some of the courses and so forth from the Department of Education. So we're very grateful for that. And Dr. Mahindra Patel, who is also a part of my education program, but we have global expert panel on ethics on pharmacy, and Dr. Mahindra Patel is Professor Mahindra Patel is the co-chair of that, along with Henry, another professor. So they have put together on the platform of the UNESCO chair some guidelines for ethics for the pharmacy discipline. Is that right, Mahindra? Yeah. So
yeah.
And this is interesting. We brought on this platform. We brought the pharmacy professionals from around the world. They have now formed we have the expert group. They've met several times, and they have now come out, and we're just publishing in the journal the guidelines. We've done the same thing with nursing. They've just published. So we had nurses from North America, South America, Asia, the whole group, and they've also come together. So this is interesting, and we look forward. I know that we are going to have, but in your case, we're going to have it in your journal, isn't it? The proceedings of the last week's program. Yep, and with those experts, a panel who spoke. So all this is going on, and I want to thank everyone for this. Is there any? And all the panelists. We have. I'm sorry, all the participants. We have wonderful participants from around the world. I can see people from different countries here. Thank you all for taking part, and we look forward to seeing you again. in the webinars that will be coming, that we continue to organize, demonstrating solidarity, reminding us we are all in this together and we will come out of it together. Thank you all. So till then, stay healthy, stay well, and stay safe. Thank you all.